She was barefoot in the snow, clutching a silent child in her arms, wearing a wedding dress torn by more than just the wind. He thought she was just another soul lost to the cold, but what she carried in her hands, and in her past, would unravel a truth that could change everything. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, like the video, and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Now, let's jump into the story. The wind in Windmere didn't whisper. It howled. It pushed through alleys, rattled windows, and tugged at coat collars like a cold, unseen hand. The sky was the color of ash, and snow fell in steady, heavy flakes, blurring the lines between street and sidewalk, silence and sound. Rowan Hartley stood on the back step of his workshop, holding a trash bag in one hand and a mug of lukewarm coffee in the other. His boots crunched softly against the frost-covered boards. Just another quiet winter night, or so he thought. He didn't expect to see her. At first, he thought it was a shadow, maybe a bundle of discarded fabric blown against the wall. But something in it moved, trembled. His eyes narrowed. There, in the narrow alley between the bakery and his workshop, someone sat slumped against the bricks. A person. A woman. Rowan dropped the bag. Coffee spilled onto the snow like ink. She wasn't just sitting. She was cradling something. As he stepped closer, the wind pulled at his coat, but he barely noticed. The woman was barefoot. Her feet were red and raw against the icy ground. She wore a thin, torn dress, white, once elegant, now soaked and clinging to her like paper. Her arms wrapped tightly around a child, a little boy maybe 5 or 6, bundled in a too small sweater. His face was pale, his lips bluish. Rowan knelt beside them. "Hey, can you hear me?" The woman looked up. Her eyes were wide but distant. She tried to speak, but her lips were cracked and dry. Still, she managed a whisper. "Please. Help him." She didn't beg. She didn't cry. She just asked, softly, as if hope was a language she hadn't used in a long time. Rowan didn't think. He pulled off his jacket and wrapped it around the child. He reached for the woman next, but she flinched, not out of fear, but from cold that had settled too deep. "I'm taking you both somewhere warm," he said. She didn't answer, but her arms never loosened from around the boy. Rowan picked them both up. She was light as driftwood, the child even lighter, and turned back toward his workshop, heart pounding, legs moving faster than the snow could fall. Inside, his 10-year-old daughter Mira looked up from her book as he pushed through the door. "Dad?" she asked, eyes widening. "Who?" "Blankets. Now." Mira jumped up without another word. Rowan laid the woman and child on the old couch near the fireplace. The heat was low, but it was better than nothing. Mira came back with blankets and her favorite, stuffed bear. She handed it to the little boy without hesitation. "What's his name?" Rowan asked gently. The woman opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She shook her head slowly, not in refusal, but in weariness. "It's okay," he said. "You're safe now." He knelt beside them and checked the boy's pulse. Faint, but there. The woman's hands were like ice, but her fingers clung tightly to the child's shoulder, protective even in near collapse. "What's your name?" he asked again. This time she answered, barely a whisper. "Nellie." Rowan nodded. "I'm Rowan. This is my daughter Mira." Mira gave a small wave. The boy didn't move. Nellie looked at Mira like she was something fragile and bright. Rowan threw more wood on the fire. The silence in the room wasn't awkward. It was thick, like everyone was waiting for something to begin again. Later, after the woman had fallen into an exhausted sleep, Rowan stood at the kitchen window, staring out at the snow-covered street. "She just appeared," he said aloud, not to anyone in particular. "She looks like someone who got lost in a story," Mira said from the doorway, "but maybe she was the hero all along." Rowan looked at his daughter, surprised by her words. Kids saw things adults missed. Back in the living room, the fire glowed gently. Nellie lay curled on one side, the boy still in her arms. Mira had placed her own quilt over them both. One corner of the fabric slipped from the couch and Rowan reached down to tuck it in. That's when he saw it. A corner of paper, an envelope, barely sticking out from under Nellie's dress. She was still clutching it, even in sleep. Her fingers were locked around it like it held the last piece of her life. He didn't try to take it. He just watched her hold it. Whatever was written on that paper, it wasn't light. It wasn't small. It was the kind of thing that weighs a person down but keeps them moving all at once. Outside, the snow kept falling. But inside Rowan Hartley's home, something had shifted. A warmth had arrived, not just from the fire, but from the presence of someone who hadn't yet told her story, but had already started changing his. Morning came quietly to the small town of Windermere. The snow still blanketed the streets, but the sky had softened from ash to pearl, and the wind had finally calmed. Inside Rowan Hartley's home, warmth was slowly settling in, not just from the fire, but from the feeling that something new had begun. Nellie Rivers woke to the scent of coffee and toast. For a moment she didn't remember where she was. The couch was soft beneath her, a quilt pulled up to her shoulders, and the child, her son Leo, was curled close against her, breathing softly. There was a hum in the house, like peace breathing, in and out. She sat up slowly, blinking at the small, cozy living room. A fire crackled gently in the stone hearth, and light filtered through the curtains like the sun was trying to be kind. She looked down at Leo, who stirred but didn't wake. There was a folded note on the coffee table, written in neat handwriting. Take your time. Coffee's hot. Toast is on the counter. Rowan. Nellie stared at the note for a long time, like it might disappear. Her fingers brushed across the paper like it was made of something fragile. In the kitchen, Rowan moved quietly, flipping toast with the back of a butter knife and watching the kettle hiss. Mira sat at the table, still in her pajamas, drawing something with colored pencils. Do you think she'll talk today? She asked. Rowan didn't answer right away. He was watching the hallway, listening for movement. Maybe, but she doesn't have to. Mira nodded and went back to her drawing. Leo smiled in his sleep last night, she said casually. I think that means something. Rowan smiled faintly. I think you're right. A moment later, Nellie appeared in the kitchen doorway, clutching the quilt around her shoulders. Her eyes flicked from Rowan to Mira and back again. She looked unsure, like someone stepping into a room where they didn't know the rules. You're up, Rowan said gently. She nodded. The note, thank you. Toast still warm, he offered. Coffee too. Nellie stepped slowly into the kitchen, and Mira scooted over to make room at the table. Nellie sat, tucking the blanket tighter around her. Rowan poured her a cup of coffee without asking. She cupped it in her hands like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Across the table, Mira smiled. I drew this for Leo, she said, sliding a piece of paper over. It was a drawing of two children standing in front of a snow fort, both smiling, surrounded by stars. Nellie's lip trembled and she blinked fast. He'll love it, she said quietly. They ate in mostly silence, but it wasn't awkward. It was the kind of quiet that lets people breathe. Later that morning, Miss Dory, a retired school teacher who lived 2 doors down, knocked on the back door. She carried a loaf of banana bread and a look of quiet curiosity. I saw someone new in the window, she said with a knowing smile. Just wanted to drop this off and say hello. Rowan accepted the bread with a nod, but he could feel Nellie tense behind him. Miss Dory peered past him. Ah, so that's her. Nellie stepped forward, still wrapped in the quilt. Her chin was lifted just enough to show pride, but her hands trembled. I'm Nellie, she said. Miss Dory gave her a soft, measured look. Well, Nellie, welcome to Windermere. And don't mind the whispers. They always start before the facts. Nellie managed a small smile. I'm used to whispers. Miss Dory's eyes softened. Then maybe it's time you got used to kindness instead. After she left, Nellie stood by the fire and stared into the flames. Rowan approached slowly, careful not to intrude. She meant well, he said. I know, Nellie replied. It's just, I've had people look at me like that before. Like they're waiting to decide if I belong. Rowan folded his arms, leaning against the wall. I've had that look too, after Mira's mom died. People didn't think I could handle it. She looked at him. How did you prove them wrong? I didn't try to, he said. I just lived. For Mira. One day at a time. They stood, in silence, the fire between them, both watching it like it could speak for them. That night, after Mira had gone to bed and Leo was finally sleeping deeply, Rowan made tea and offered Nellie a cup. She sat on the couch, the envelope she always carried now resting quietly on her lap. Do you want to talk about it? He asked gently. She shook her head. Not yet. That's okay, he said. Whenever you're ready. She looked at him, something soft flickering in her eyes. Thank you for not asking questions I'm not ready to answer. You don't owe me anything, Rowan replied. You just showed up on a night when the world felt colder than usual. That's enough for me. Nellie held the tea in her hands, and for the first time in weeks, she felt something warm and unfamiliar spread through her chest. Not relief, not safety, possibility. She didn't know if she'd stay. She didn't know if the town would let her. But for now, the fire was lit, the house was quiet, and the stranger who had taken her in didn't look at her like a burden. He looked at her like someone who deserved to begin again. The days in Windmere passed slowly, like snow melting off the roof in early spring. And for Nellie Rivers, that was a good thing. Every morning started the same. Rowan made coffee. Mira fed Leo spoonfuls of warm oatmeal. The fire burned quietly. In the living room, and the sound of laughter, soft at first, began to return to the little wooden house. But something stayed the same, too. The letter. It never left Nellie's side. She kept it tucked in her coat during the day and under her pillow at night. It wasn't a long letter, just one envelope. One secret. And though Rowan never asked what was inside, he always seemed to glance at it with quiet curiosity. He didn't push. He never had. Maybe that was why Nellie stayed. One cold Thursday afternoon, while Mira and Leo were building a snow fort in the backyard, a car pulled up outside the house. Not the usual kind either. This one was long, black, and far too clean for Windmere's muddy roads. Nellie saw it from the window and her breath caught. Rowan stepped onto the porch as the door opened. A tall man in a dark overcoat stepped out, holding a briefcase and wearing a tired smile. Mr. Hartley? He asked politely. Rowan nodded. Who's asking? My name is Joel Emery. I'm here on behalf of the Rivers family. At those words, Nellie stood from the couch so fast the quilt slipped off her shoulders. Joel saw her through the doorway and gave a respectful nod. Miss Rivers, I've been looking for you for quite some time. Nellie stayed silent. I'm not here to bring trouble, Joel said, his voice gentle. I have a letter from your father, his last one. A beat of silence fell between them. He passed away 3 weeks ago, Joel continued. Heart failure, quick, peaceful. Rowan looked at Nellie. Her face was pale, unreadable. Joel stepped forward and held out a second envelope. This was meant for you. And Ian, there's more. You've been reinstated as heir to the Rivers family trust. It's all legally yours again. Everything. Nellie didn't take the envelope right away. She just stared at it like it might explode. After a long pause, she took it gently and nodded. Thank you, Mr. Emery. He dipped his head again. No one's forcing anything. We only want you to know. You don't have to keep hiding. Then he left as quietly as he had come. Later that night, after Mira and Leo had fallen asleep, under a pillow fort made of couch cushions and old blankets, Rowan found Nellie sitting alone on the porch steps. She held both envelopes in her lap, her fingers brushing the edges as if afraid to open either. I didn't want him to find me, she said quietly. Rowan sat beside her, keeping just enough distance. Is that your father's letter? She nodded. He never liked questions, only expectations. When I got pregnant with Leo, he told me to fix the problem or leave the family. Rowan looked at her, his face calm but serious. I left, she said, took what little I had, and ran. I never planned to go back. Rowan glanced down at the envelopes. You don't have to open them. I know, Nellie whispered. But I think I need to. She opened the first letter, the one she had carried all this time. The ink was smudged, and the paper slightly torn, but she knew every word by heart. If you read this, it means I couldn't keep pretending. I chose to be your mother once, but not the way you needed. I hope you choose better for your child. Don't hide forever. You were born for more than shadows. Nellie folded it gently, placing it on her lap. Then, with trembling fingers, she opened the second. This one was different. Written in neat, sharp handwriting. Her father's. I built an empire, Nellie. But you walked away from it for love. I didn't understand that, not then, maybe not even now, but if you're reading this, know this, you are free. You owe us nothing. What I called weakness might have been courage all along. She sat in silence for a long time after that, the paper shaking in her hands. Rowan reached over and rested his hand beside hers, not touching, but near enough that she could feel his warmth. You don't have to go back, he said. She nodded, slowly. I know. I think I finally believe it. Inside the house, the firelight flickered against the walls, casting soft shadows. Mira had placed a paper star on the windowsill earlier that day. She had drawn a tiny family on it, smiling stick figures with bright yellow hair and blue hearts. Nellie stood up and walked back into the house, the letters still in her hands. But this time they didn't feel like chains. They felt like something she could finally put down. And as she stepped over the threshold, the quiet hum of hope stirred once more inside the little wooden house, stronger than before. Spring arrived slowly in Windermere. The snow melted in quiet patches like winter was learning to let go. Trees budded cautiously. The ground softened. And in the small wooden house at the edge of town, something else had started to bloom. Something deeper than flowers. Nellie stood in the backyard, watching Leo chase Mira between puddles and patches of wet grass. Laughter echoed across the garden, real and light and full of life. The kind of laughter that once felt far away. She held a folded paper star in her hand, one of many they had begun making together. Mira had shown her how to fold them, how to crease each corner with care, and then write something hopeful inside. This, one said tomorrow in her own handwriting. She tucked it onto the windowsill beside the others. There were stars labeled family, bravery, home, and stay. Dozens of small wishes that weren't about riches or status, just the quiet miracles of everyday life. Inside, Rowan was wiping his hands on a dish towel. He'd just finished fixing the screen door and was watching Nellie through the kitchen window. She'd changed since the night he found her in the alley. Her shoulders no longer curved inward. Her eyes didn't dart away when someone spoke. She stood taller now, not out of pride, but peace. That afternoon, Rowan called the kids to the porch. I've got something for all of us, he said, carrying a small wooden box. They gathered around, curious. Leo held Mira's hand. Nellie stood just behind them, arms crossed lightly, unsure. Rowan set the box on the garden table and opened it. Inside were old papers, legal documents, names, titles, and one final envelope. The deed to the Rivers family estate. Nellie's breath caught. She hadn't seen the papers since Joel Emery handed them to her weeks ago. She had meant to decide what to do with them, but they sat untouched, waiting. Now, they were here. Rowan looked at her. I figured, maybe today's the day. Nellie stepped forward. She looked at the papers, then at her son who was watching her with wide, trusting eyes. She thought of all the places they had slept, the meals skipped, the nights filled with fear. She thought of the cold alley, And then of Mira's drawings, Rowan's hands building shelves, and the sound of Leo's laughter returning. She picked up the envelope slowly, held it over the fire pit Rowan had cleaned out that morning, and let go. The flame caught gently. The papers curled at the edges, turning black, then soft gray. No drama, no speeches, just the quiet ending of something heavy. She exhaled, a full breath, a free one. Later that evening, they all walked into town for the annual spring gathering. The town square was full of folding tables, flower baskets, and warm cinnamon rolls handed out by smiling neighbors. For the first time, no one whispered when Nellie passed. They smiled, waved, welcomed. Leo sat at the children's craft table, folding his first paper star. Mira helped him write the word hope in thick crayon letters. Rowan stood beside, Nellie holding 2 cups of cocoa. "You're not hiding anymore," he said gently. "I'm not," she agreed. "I thought I had to run from who I used to be, but now I see. I just needed to run toward something better." He looked at her, his gaze steady and soft. "What are you running toward now?" She smiled. "This." That night, after the kids had fallen asleep, Rowan led Nellie out to the porch. Tiny lights were strung across the railing. A candle flickered on the small table, and next to it sat a folded paper star, just like the others. But this one had a single word written in bold. "Ink begin." Nellie picked it up and held it against her chest. Rowan took her hands. "This isn't a proposal," he said quickly, blushing. "Not yet, but it's a promise that whatever comes next, I'm not walking away." She stepped closer. "Neither am I." Then they kissed, soft and slow, not like a fairy tale, but like real life. Like 2 people who had been through fire and found warmth in each other. As they sat together on the porch swing, the stars above blinked quietly in the sky, and the paper stars inside the house fluttered slightly in the breeze. In that moment, Nellie knew. She had not just found shelter. She had found something better. She had found a future.